Do we need to review Zoom procedures?
No, we only have us online right now, so we're good.
Okay. Does anyone want to make a motion to approve the agenda for today? I will second. All right, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Oh, we can see Sean now. Comments from the chair. I did not realize I was going to share today. I don't have any comments. I am curious. There's been a lot of discussion on Front Porch Forum about the safety of the bike path, which is something I care a lot about. I also tried to use it with my campers the other week and couldn't. So I'm curious, Mike, if there's any city plan happening to address all of these concerns?
It is a big item. I know the police department and fire department are working on it.
Okay.
And it is just, they go through, they clean it up, they move them out, and they move back in just as quick. So
Right.
they are working on it, and it's just a topic that's gonna need to get resolved at some point. The police recognize it.
Right. Oh, and I've talked to the chief of police about it. I mean, I would like to bring back that I think there should be a planning solution to the bike path issue. And I know my husband said from the Complete Streets Committee meeting the other day that they are looking into whether it can be designated either under the authority of the Parks Commission or DPW, because right now I think no one's really claiming it as their own, which is another kind of issue why Parks doesn't see the need to maintain it because it's not a park, and DPW doesn't see a need to maintain it because it's not a road. So I think there are like longer term solutions than having the police deal with this on like an ad hoc basis. So I would again hope the planning commission might think about taking it up and offering our input to city council as people who study planning and might have some ideas to offer. I see we're going to have an update later on about different planning projects in the city. So I will wait for that. General business, I don't think we have anyone here, right?
Correct. We don't have anyone here, so no general business.
Okay, so on to number 5, update on planning projects.
So just an update to everybody on the regional approval. So that is Thursday, the 21st. So not this Thursday, but the following Thursday at 6:30. That is CVRPC. I will send out the meeting invite when it gets a little bit closer. So that way you have it if anyone wants to attend and kind of put support behind the city plan so we can get that across the finish line. The other finish line.
Sorry, is that or only over?
It's Zoom. The in-person is the RPC, which is above the old Walgreens.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a fairly small space, but they've got a conference room there. But
mostly people are joining on Zoom.
Mostly people will go by Zoom.
What time is that? Do you know?
6:30.
Okay.
Where are we in their review process? Number 1 and number 2, have they flagged any specific concerns?
No,
Yeah.
it was reviewed and we went through the public hearing process. It kind of got jammed up when it went to the full board. So they warned a special meeting. Primarily at the full board, the concern was that there wasn't a transcript of the subcommittee that reviewed the plan, approved it unanimously. The staff has reviewed it. They're fine with it. But at the subcommittee public hearing, there was an hour of testimony. And then when it got to the full board, the complaint that was made was that the full board didn't have a transcript of the testimony. And therefore the board voted to have another meeting so that way they could have that information transcribed and comments provided by staff as to whether or not it actually is relevant to the regional approval or not. And so far, we have there are no concerns from the staff of its regional compliance. So, but we're still hoping, we know there's going to be some folks there to argue against the plan, and some of it has been that some of the, I guess the positive responses that the Regional Planning Commission has had in response to it was like, oh, well, it sounds like there isn't support for this plan at the local level, and maybe we should be involved in this. And what we want to be able to do is at least have some folks there that are able to go through and say, no, these individuals have given testimony. We have heard their testimony, we've reviewed their testimony, and we simply haven't accepted their recommendations. It's not that this plan has, just run over and not addressed these concerns. So that is where some of the arguments have been. So we just want to make sure that it's recognized that we've listened, we've heard, and we've made these decisions based on the vote of the Planning Commission and the vote of City Council. Hopefully, it's not going to be a big, long, drawn-out process, but that just hasn't been how things have been lately, so we'll see. Regarding the CDBG-DR application, so that's Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery applications. These have been in the news quite a bit. The $68 million that came to the state. When there's a disaster, the federal government takes about 10 or 15% of the disaster funds and gives that to the state as a block grant to be administered through the Community Development Program to help rebuild and make communities more resilient. The emphasis is that most of that money will be in Washington County and Lamoille County. Some other places are allowed to apply, but like 48 million of it is targeted for us. We put in, as a city, as a municipality, we put in 5 applications totaling about $18 million. So one was the Country Club Road infrastructure, to run infrastructure up to the Country Club Road site in order to make resilient housing. That one, we're going to have to see how that goes, because we weren't aware before that they expect the housing project to be in the application, which of course we don't have our housing developer yet. So we're going to have a meeting. We're going to find out how they would like to have that conversation. How do we move this forward? The second is Home Farm Way. That's a project that already has funding. They're going to be removing 21,000 cubic yards of fill and removing the Bailey Dam, which is just upstream of the Bailey Bridge. And so that project already has funding, but the state would like us to go through for DR funding because the feds, through the hazard mitigation program, are picking up 80% of it, and the state was going to pay the other 20. Well, the state wants to have the DR funds cover the other 20 so they can keep their funds. When you have restricted fund and unrestricted funds, you'd like to keep your unrestricted funds because you can use them for different things that you can't. So I think that's what they want. So we've applied for the Home Farm Way. The third is the Bailey Dam removal. The state said that was one they felt it was not funded through hazard mitigation. They felt could be funded through disaster recovery. So we simply put that application, that pre-application in. Bailey Dam is the one that's on Main Street next to Shaw's. The fourth is the water recovery, water recovery, resource recovery facility. So that's our sewer plant down on Dog River Road. That's another project that we feel really needs to be funded. It's a mitigation project. Our sewer plant is probably $80 to $100 million. It's very, very expensive. We put a lot of money. We, the federal government, state government, everybody's put a lot of money into making that plant a state-of-the-art plant. And the Dog River Road is what keeps it from flooding. It acts as a levee and keeps the water out. And Dog River Road is 1 inch lower than the 100-year floodplain. So it's there's a, it's a reasonable, it's reasonably at risk. There's a very good chance that that will be overtopped at some point. And if it does, then the sewer plant's under 11 feet of water. And that would shut down the plant probably for weeks or months while it gets back online. So for a relatively small $2 million or so, we could elevate Dog River Road and put in a bypass on the influent and effluent pipes. So at this point, the only way for water to go in is through the sewer pipe, which we have some CSOs, combined sewer overflows. So what happens is the water goes in those and just starts to fill up the sewer plant from the pipe. Or it can go force itself in through the effluent pipe where the treated sewage comes out, can force it back in. So we've got backflow preventers, but we really should have a much more secure way of just shutting down the plant. If the water reaches a certain level, it gets shut down. So yes, we wouldn't be treating the sewage for the couple of hours that this water is that high, but we also would be saving our $100 million plant. And as soon as the water goes back down, we can turn it back. So that is the application for the water resource recovery facility. We think it would be money well spent. It hasn't received funding yet. We hope this will be a good opportunity. And our fifth project is Elm Street culverts. There are 3 culverts on Elm Street that are about half the size of what they're supposed to be. So there's one at like Finch Road, and then there's just as you kind of walk out, there are a couple more on your way towards Wrightsville. So there are 3 of them. Each one of them, I was surprised to see the size. The existing culvert is 7.5 feet wide by 6 feet high, and they're going to replace it with a 15-foot wide, 6-foot high. So it's literally half the size of what it's supposed to be. And if these fail, when these culverts fail, they take out the roads. And so how do we get to the Wrightsville Dam? How do we get to do mutual aid to Worcester and these other communities if any one of these 3, right now there are 3 of them that are at risk of getting blown out. It only takes one to basically shut down that class 1 highway. So we believe all 5 of these are really good, valid projects that would improve the resiliency of the community for the next flood. And we'll just see. At this point, they're pre-applications. We then will have a meeting to meet with the state to talk about what they see, and they may go through and say, that's not going to get funded. That one goes away. We're going to hire, at the recommendation of the state, we're asking city council on Wednesday to authorize us to hire a professional grant writer to specifically write these. CDBG grants have their own language and their own requirements. So having somebody who knows those ins and outs would improve our chance of getting funded. The applications are due September 30th. So we kind of have a short turnaround for 5 applications, but that's what we've been working on over the past 2 weeks, is getting the pre-apps in and getting ready.
I'm just curious, is
Yep.
that 18 million that's municipal, like earmarked for the municipal, is that part of the 48 earmarked for Washington, or is it separate from that?
It would be competing. Some of it would be competing for the 48 that's targeted for us. Some of it would be competing for the 68 overall.
Okay.
Because some of it's in mitigation. So certain ones of these that are like the Elm Street culverts and the water resource recovery facility may be coming out of the mitigation dollars, which are a subset. So the state breaks the full 68 to a number of different pots, some housing, some infrastructure, some mitigation, and we will have to compete within a pool for certain dollars.
And just so I have it straight, the 48 that's sort of earmarked for Washington,
I think it's about that 48
That-
minutes.
that's within the 68?
Yeah,
Okay,
so
I'm
there's
just
a
trying to
certain
figure out how to-
percentage that had to go to the areas that were impacted directly,
All right.
or had the declared disaster, I believe. So I'm not the expert in all of these, but there's a percentage of it that's for the areas that were declared disasters. But other places around the state were damaged but weren't federal disasters. So Hardwick was in Caledonia County. and did not get a federal declaration because it's on the edge of Lamoille County, which was, and got damaged, but is outside of the guaranteed pot of money, so they would have to compete for those. I think Ludlow is another community that was hit hard by the flood, but the county did not get a declaration, so they would be competing for that other pot of funds. Okay. But the hardest hit communities, Johnson, Montpelier, Berry City. Plainfield was hit worse the next year, so this is targeted for the 23 flood. Plainfield's hard hit was 24, so they'll have some funding. There'll be some DR funds that will eventually come around that will be probably more targeted to them. Now they can apply because they're in Washington County. They can apply for projects anyways, because they are in Washington County.
Have there been any updates on Country Club Road since we last talked?
Other than the application we put in, we're still working on the infrastructure project. We're gonna be going, I don't know if we've set the date for going to city council with the plans. So we are putting together engineered plans. We have to go to city council to have them kind of say, yes, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna do these changes to the intersection. We're gonna change the grade of the road, or we're not gonna change the grade of the road. We're gonna put a sidewalk. We're not gonna put a sidewalk, those types of things. We have a set of recommendations. We are gonna recommend a wide sidewalk. It won't technically be a shared use path because it's so steep, we don't think people can safely ride bikes up it or down it. So, but it'll just be a wide sidewalk that will go up to the site. So we'll have a set of recommendations. It's not gonna be on the 13th. I'm thinking it might be on the 27th.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions about planning projects in the city?
Well, one thing that's a bit of an aside, but I don't know what prompted this in my mind. Is anything related to Country Club Road, is the timeline for the development of Country Club Road gonna be impacted by Bill Frazier's departure and like while we're looking for the new permanent city manager?
I don't.
Just curious.
Yeah, no, I don't think that will have an impact on it. The changing state law, with a couple of pieces will probably change the approach, how we're doing that, and that will be a topic of discussion for Wednesday at city council. So should we continue to do a growth center application, basically? That's just gonna be a question. There's limited value in doing it now because going in as a tier 1A community, on the future land use map at the Regional Planning Commission, if we get that, we get the designation as a tier 1A area, and if Country Club Road is included with that, then we would basically get the same benefits as the growth center. There's going to be a similar amount of work, but it's not as hard of a lift to get there. So
Is that pathway to tier 1A sort of ironed out, you know, it's confident that it's moving forward at the state level is on track? You know, one concern is that, you know, there's sort of a lot of talk and promises, but nothing really set in stone yet, unless I'm mistaken about the move forward.
yeah, the rules will go into effect. As far as I know, I have not heard anything that says that they're looking for any delays. I know Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission is the one in the lead. They're going to be the first ones to get their maps sent to the state for approval. The Land Use Review Board, the new Land Use Review Board.
Mhm.
We're in the second group, so we'll be going in December. I think the biggest delay is how long does it take to get our regional plan to get that map adopted into the regional plan. But as far as I know, the process we used, and so Nick from my office went through and made the map that we put in the city plan that said, here's what we think would be the future land use map for Montpelier, and what areas in there would then translate into a tier 1A status. as he's been looking around the state at what is Franklin County and Chittenden County and other places have for their maps, our maps look almost identical to
Yeah.
theirs. If you pull St. Albans and those areas out, they're designating their maps almost exactly the same as we are. So I'm confident that our map is very consistent with other places around the state.
Yeah.
And that's what the whole purpose of that law was that they wanted all the regional planning commissions to follow the same rules, so we would have consistencies across the state on future land use maps.
Sure.
And I think we're getting there. And I think the outcome is it's working. We're having, as you pluck them out, they are looking right. If they were looking different, then yeah, I would say, yeah, this may be heading for a train wreck because Northwest isn't interpreting things the same way as Addison, who
Yeah.
isn't the same as
Sure.
Bennington. But right now, as we looked at him, as Nick is just interested in how this is rolling out, he's been peeking at the other maps and has said it's been remarkably consistent with how everybody's been doing it.
Great.
So I'm hopeful that means if they wanted them all the same, they're all starting to look the same, they'll probably roll out on schedule, which is that the rules for Tier 1A, the applications will be available starting January 1st for communities to apply.
Great.
Okay, any other questions? Nope. Oh,
I was curious if there are updates. I've been a little bit out of the loop. If there are any updates on at Country Club Road around what is it, the childcare and recreation developments. I've just been out of the loop.
So the two applications were sent in. The child care, which is Turtle Island, that part has been approved. I believe we have a contract signed with them or a lease signed with them. So they are probably working on that right now to do their fit up so they can be ready for, I think their goal was to be ready for Labor Day. So they would have that, and they changed halfway through. So originally they were going to bring a smaller group, and now they're, I think, going for the larger.
Yep.
They're going to try to have their full operation there.
Yep.
The recreation, the hub group, they have more questions to be answered. We're still, as staff, negotiating and working with them to come up with some draft language for the city council to consider and identify issues and barriers. And they're looking at a two-piece thing. One is the leasing space on the building, and the other is trying to lease space to build a facility.
Mhm.
And so there's just a lot that
Sure.
is up in the air still on that one.
Okay.
I don't know when that will reach council.
Great. Thank you for the updates.
okay. Any other questions? Nope. Should we move on to looking at part 1?
So
Can't remember how far we got.
yeah, we got through it, and I
We
think
got
it,
through all of it.
yeah, I think at this point, we were just going to start going through and having more in-depth conversations about this. Meredith was out right up until today, so, and I had to be out for part of today. So we kind of went through and had a conversation to debrief on what had been discussed. And a lot of it she agrees with and likes, and I can just quickly go through a couple of the thoughts, and then I guess we can just go through whatever other questions and ideas you guys want us to keep looking at, and we'll hopefully have a start to be able to put together some red lines as we move into part 2. We can start having some red lines developed of part 1 that we can go back to. And I think we had a couple of open questions that were like, we won't be able to answer these until we get all the way through the document. But I think in the first page, we're just going to look at on section 1003, the construction of regulations. It calls out the equal treatment of housing. We're just going to double check to make sure there aren't other things. We should call out all of the limitations if there are more. And if those tie to the exemptions, like the ag forestry and telecommunications, maybe all of those should be in the same spot, just for organizational purposes. Let's see if we can put them all in the same place. And I was just looking at a little bit of the applicability. We had talked a little bit about how things fall into buckets, and we have to be careful about how we construct our ordinance at the last meeting. And we did actually have very recently an appeal. I'll try to stay above the appeal because I don't want to get into the legal merits of the appeal, but there was an appeal of a project and it was of a subdivision. And one of the things they've argued is that we didn't do site plan review for the subdivision. So when we look at the rules, even though there are no criteria that would actually apply to a subdivision, you know, outdoor lighting, what would the impact of the subdivision have on outdoor lighting? Well, the subdivision, you're subdividing land, it's not creating any light. So that's why we hadn't done it in the past, but we're now like, well, it wasn't exempt. So therefore, as you look at the buckets of falling into things, we should have had an evaluation that said not applicable, not applicable, not applicable, not applicable. So these
So
are the
who-
types of things
Who
that
was
we,
appealing in that situation?
oh, it's a project that somebody was appealing a neighboring subdivision.
Okay, so it's just a resident
Yeah.
appealing.
Yeah, and if you want to stop a project, then you just
That's it.
you point out all of the things, and
so
that's
they
one of the
are saying
things
that the project didn't undergo the site review. And so whatever permit issued is inapplicable.
yeah, well, they're arguing that the permit was improperly issued because the site plan criteria were not considered.
Okay.
And these are the really legally nuanced things that as zoning administrator and planner, we try to stay a little bit ahead of. So sometimes when we talk about these rules and how they may, this just says so much. Sometimes it's because these are the things. This is an actual thing that we're like, crap, now we're gonna have to add language in to put an exemption in for future things, but we also have to figure out what to do with the existing subdivision that is now gonna be delayed. But we're working with our attorneys on the specific case. But when we were talking about the last meeting about, applicability, if it doesn't trigger development, then it doesn't need a permit. And if it does, and we'll have applicability show up repeatedly throughout this document as we get to conditional use. Applicability, who needs to go through conditional use review? And there's a very specific thing. And site plan, who needs to go through site plan? Who needs to go through major site plan? Who needs to go through minor site plan? Subdivision, who needs to go through a major subdivision? Who needs to go through a minor subdivision? And all of those. So the applicability statements are important, and we'll have this conversation again when we get to them. But I just wanted to point out, real world just came up today. Here we go. We're kind of like, our whole thing is not to have somebody find a gap in our regulations or a gap in how we administer them, to use that as the bat to beat up the developer on. But that's what we've got in this case. So we'll work on fixing it. Under exemptions, Meredith thought your suggestions were great for chopping those right down. So when we talked about 1101A, number 1, shortening that up to normal maintenance repair of existing structures, yes. And she agrees that should be moved to point B because actually no permits allowed for the following development. Actually, that should stay here because normal maintenance and repair. I'll have to check with her on that one, whether that one is an A or a B. Because generally, normal maintenance and repair, even of a historic structure, is still going to be exempt. So that probably stays right here. But the other ones where you had those suggestions, shorten up number 3, we agreed those are good. She wasn't sure about number 11, the landscaping. We had talked about landscaping and outdoor lighting associated with single and two-family parcels,
Oh, whether it should go up to,
whether it should go up to 6. She was thinking with the new administrative site plan, there continues to be value in having those. We've had projects in the past where the lighting or the landscaping is important in those. But if we've adjusted the rules, and this may be one we come back.
right, this would almost be like an end run around what we just tried to do.
Yeah.
Like, if we're saying that they don't need major site plan review for 6 or fewer units, but now they still do need a permit for landscaping outdoor lighting, which is part of the site plan review.
Yeah, which
So
is
did-
part of the minor site plan, yes.
Right, so it kind of, it's.
Yep.
It brings things back to, I guess, the pre-July 9th.
Yep.
Code. Was it, what, I'm curious, like, what are the landscaping? Cause I mean, is landscaping like literally like what bushes and trees are put in, like, or is it more about like runoff and, you know,
I think the
drainage?
easiest thing, we'll just note that when we get to it.
Okay.
There's generally not a lot of issues with the outdoor lighting, except with the intensity and the amount of the lamps,
Mhm.
making sure they're shielded. So we have had an appeal in the past of a project where it was a fourplex that had a floodlight that was really bright and was shining at a neighbor's,
Right,
because they were trying to shine it on the parking lot, but it was too broad, cast too broadly, and it was a really cool lamp color. And so really what all they had to do is adjust and replace the light bulb with a warm light, and then the neighbors were fine with that. So it was, but we have a requirement that says you have to use warm lights, so that way they're not intense. Cool lights, as they call them, have a much more intense light to them. And so same number of lumens, just more yellow instead of more white makes them better. And so she thinks, based on applications she's reviewed, these are really easy to meet, especially with the lumen requirements. These are not complicated things, that most projects can meet those requirements pretty easy. The landscaping, again, I think as we go through the landscaping, we should review it in light of, should there be certain landscape requirements that are just for major? You know, there may be some that were like, this is good for minor, this is good for minor, this is good for minor, but that one really needs to be only for major or something like that.
Right, before we flip the page, I had a couple notes on item number 2. I don't know if Meredith had anything to weigh in on. I had kind of struck out the word stabilize and secure and changed that to repair the existing structure. And we had a discussion about if we should use shall or may require a zoning permit.
Mhm.
I don't know if that is now the time is to revisit that, or if Meredith has already weighed in with her opinion.
She didn't give an opinion on that one. My thought on that one was, yeah, repair existing structure back to original. I've got a note in there on that. I don't know if that was one that was waiting for our future review. Back to original. I can get her opinion on that for next time. I didn't specifically ask her on that one. I thought that was one of the ones that we were waiting on, but actually I think it's one that we could get some more input on.
Okay.
On the next page, we had the exempt, except for design review. She thought one change, she thought we have any accessory building. She thought we could put that to structure. So there's a difference between a building and structure. All buildings are structures, not all structures are buildings. So buildings have walls and roofs, but a structure could be a swimming pool, for example. So she thought number 3 could be kind of lumped into, if it meets that requirement, then it could be in, that might help eliminate some of those questions on that one. It may not get all of them, but, and then ancillary to a residential use. So she had a question on that. So the exemption is currently written, any accessory building ancillary to a residential use. So even if it was a 50-unit building, you could have these accessory structures exempt from zoning. And she was wondering whether that should just be limited for residential uses up to 6 units. Just because sometimes what these accessory structures are things, propane tanks, or it could be a 500-gallon propane tank and some other things that you might want to have screening on, or other things that you might be like. So she thought an idea would be just to give that exemption up to 6 units, but because currently commercial properties don't get the benefit. So even if it's a small commercial property, it wouldn't receive that benefit.
What number is that?
It's 1101B, number 1.
So adding in letter D that talks about a certain number of,
And so 1, any accessory switch out building the structure ancillary to residential use up to 6 units,
oh, God,
that colon.
okay.
I mean, to me, like, I feel like I said this last time too. I mean, less than 100 square feet is very small. 10 by 10
Yes.
foot square.
Yep.
I don't see why we would want to require a permit for if it's an 8-unit residence, as opposed to like, it seems like it's just a very small footprint. So I think I don't see the need to require permits for over 6 units in that one.
Okay, yeah, it was just a suggestion she had.
I mean, I still come back to, why are we requiring these permits in the design review overlay district? Like the whole section is kind of like, well, what are we trying to achieve in our design review overlay district?
Yeah.
And how are these kind of negatively impacting the design review overlay district to the point that we want to review it and issue a permit for it? Like,
I think I take your point, and I'm sorry to interject. I get stuck on this as well. And I feel like it might be beneficial if we dedicate a future meeting to a discussion of like what the function and purpose and value of the design overlay district is. I mean, I just
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, it'll be in part 2. That is half of
Okay.
part
I think
2.
that'll be helpful to all of us, because
Yep.
I get hung up on it too, because I know that there are certain attributes that the overlay district has that I always gets lost on me, and so without knowing it, I'm always like, yeah, why why does this thing exist? And
okay.
so
But I think also it could be a chance for us to reevaluate what we want out of this district. If we're redoing all the zoning right now, or we're looking through it so
Yeah.
in such detail, this
Yeah.
could be a chance for the city to rethink.
Yeah, we recently rewrote those rules. The Historic Preservation Commission rewrote them, and I think they were passed in 2020. So they're fairly new, and they've been operating far better than they used to, than the old rules. Now, it's not to say we can't make adjustments and work on them, but I would say that from a wholesale reworking of them, they were just redone, and they are functioning a lot better than they used to.
Yeah.
With the new rules in effect. So the number two, the solar devices, she said that that one we should keep in here. Again, we'll have some conversations when we get the discussion of the design review rules. There are, when it comes to a historic building with a slate roof, how these solar panels would get mounted to a slate roof are very particular. And so the historic, so for the most part, most of these ones that end up going to the DRC for some of these end up just being, yeah, that's fine. This is fine. This is fine. This is fine. Now, if we could find a nice clean cut way of shuffling some of those to be administrative approvals, then we could still have the rule and let them get approved without the burden of the hearing. But in certain cases, like a solar energy device on a historic slate roof, the board wants to be able to evaluate those. But the swimming pool, she felt, was like, yeah, that probably can have get a shuffle over to number one, and we can have a conversation about clarifying when these need and don't need permits to decide
Hey, Mike.
whether, yeah, go ahead, Gabe.
Just if I can just comment on that, I mean, to me, it seems very similar to the conversation about steep slopes or something. Like we're not, appointed because we're engineers or design experts or anything like that, right? We're here because we're serving in the community. If there's some technical reason that you can't mount something to a slate roof, to me, that absolutely should be something that somebody who's an expert in that area should be able to sign off saying this meets all the criteria or whatever it is, right? Like somebody should be able to do that and not leave it to an arbitrary board of, like citizens that are trying to do good things. But why make it harder to do something we want them to do? We'd love to have more solar.
Yeah, no, that's a policy decision of the planning commission and council as to where that line is. The protection of the historic resources. They can mount those on there, but they would have to destroy the historic integrity of the roofs that they would be going on. And the review is really to make sure that they're doing it in an appropriate manner. But if it's not regulated, we can't tell them to do it. And that's
My point's just, it's not so much of that. It's like, what are they going to review that some professional couldn't write a letter that they have to be mounted in a particular way? To me, it's the equivalent of an engineer saying, well, these steep slopes and the way that this is engineered is it's not going to create water problems, for the people downslope, right? Like to me, that's the same thing. I don't know who does that, but if there's somebody who, I mean, I just don't understand what citizens would have to contribute to that conversation that a professional couldn't do instead.
Yeah, as we go through the design review rules, let's go and look and see if there are places we could shift stuff to administrative, provided certain information is provided in the application.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, we'll keep that in mind.
I also wonder if it can be written more precisely. If the concern is historic slate roofs, then maybe this need for a permit should only affect people with historic slate roofs. You know what I mean? If that is a concern.
All right. And turning the page. The ag and forestry, as I said, we're gonna go through and make sure we have all the exemptions in there. I mean, we have 2 statutory exemptions. It's always kind of seems strange to go through and just pluck 2 out of the air. Maybe we should have a more general exemption. I mean, it would shorten this up, which everybody likes to shorten it up. If we just went through and said other statutory exemptions and then listed them with the reference. I noted that neither the ag and forestry nor the utilities and energy infrastructure has the actual statutory reference in it. These are exempt from zoning by statute, and we should probably have that in there. But again, Are there others that we should have, and maybe we should have a list, and maybe we should have a section, or maybe it should be labeled that all statutory exemptions under state law. And therefore, if the state changes state law again, it would automatically be applied to our regulations. Which we know they would in practice, but the way zoning works, the zoning administrator is required to literally enforce the zoning regulations. So if our zoning regulations violate state law, she's required to issue a permit that would violate state law, and that would then have to be resolved by the DRB. We'd rather not have a system where we knowingly are issuing permits we're not supposed to, but or denying a permit that we should be approving. We would rather have the rules set up with enough flexibility. And so Meredith and I will work on some strikeout that will hopefully clean this up a little bit. And yeah, just make sure that we've got them all covered and make sure that it's much more simplified.
So I'm a bit confused as to, I mean, the language I find confusing in and of itself. Like, a zoning permit is not required to build a farm structure as follows. 1, the landowner shall complete a zoning permit application. Those 2 sentences, like, I don't understand how those 2 sentences.
It's actually how state law puts it and how it's administered under state law. They go through and say, if you want to build, so you want to build a barn and you're an agricultural operation, you are supposed to still apply for a permit. We can't charge a fee. And then we would evaluate it to make sure it meets the setback and height requirements. And if it doesn't, then the farmer would be required to get a letter from the Agency of Ag that says they're exempt from it. So
Okay.
it's the rules, the ag exemptions are not as clean cut as, yeah, you can do whatever you want.
Okay. So that's just the process. The landowner has to complete a form, the application.
Yep.
Administrative officer cannot charge a fee. Okay, so maybe it's just that introductory sentence is confusing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and maybe we should be just clear about that point. I just think this talks about some things, it doesn't talk about all things, and I think it would be better just to have the statutory reference in there.
Mhm.
Like utilities, energy, telecommunications, there's a statutory reference. If you get a certificate of public good, you're exempt from zoning. And that's
Okay.
period. But they have all this discussion in here and you're kind of like, all right. Now the tower that the telecommunication infrastructure goes on might be regulated, but the telecommunications infrastructure is not. So we didn't have too much under the vested rights. We had some conversations. I can answer any questions there. Legal considerations, again, that's pretty straightforward. For reasonable accommodation for accessibility, and the miscellaneous provisions were pretty straightforward. So I didn't get any other comments from the public or any planning commissioner in between, so I didn't have anything else to kind of look at. But I think we have enough, or at least hopefully everybody at least has enough big picture understanding of what part 1 is. And, you know, the big takeaway is development needs a permit. Here's the definition of development. And then we have 2 sets of exemptions. One set of exemptions that are for all over town, and another set of exemptions that are only for areas outside of the design review district. And so we'll follow through and have some additional conversation on those 2 points. As it goes forward, we're going to probably come back to go through and reference back to these big concepts. And if people have questions, we can start to take them up. But I think once you've got a full understanding of the whole zoning, some of these will make a little bit more sense when we come back around to a final review. And as I said, Meredith and I will start picking away at getting a red line version going for part one. And I guess I can give a quick, unless there are more questions on part one, a quick introduction of what's in part two.
Just really quickly with I appreciate you guys putting a red line together. I think that'll be helpful. That's a good starting point to kickstart a broader discussion. This is just brass tacks mechanics. Now that we no longer have access to OneDrive, right? We can't use that to be editing our document.
Correct.
All
You
right,
can't
so I'm
use
just
one-
trying to think about what's the most efficient way for us to all take a stab at edits. I don't have an answer, but it's just something to think about. So
Yes, sometimes, I mean, I can email a Word version of the zoning out. And individually, you guys can note and highlight up. It's a really big document. This thing, even though it doesn't have a lot of stuff in it, it's got so much formatting in it that it's like 30 megabytes. It's a monstrous document. But, or I can send out the PDF if people want to have enough to be able to put comments on the side.
I guess I'll work out my own red lines. Out.
All right, I'll email. Oh, do you want me to wait on, just send you guys the email with the red line? Not send you something in advance?
That's fine with me.
Okay. All right, I'll email a red line when it's ready.
One comment that I had based on the last discussion in 1206.c, number 2. It's page 1-9, and it's the section 1206.c, number 2. Right now, it kind of is talking about non-conforming structures. Number 2 says the applicant receives a zoning permit for reconstruction within 12 months of the structure being damaged or destroyed. And we had kind of talked about a scenario, what if it takes more time to save up for money for this reconstruction? So just wanted to flag that as something to reconsider if needed.
Yeah, I think we actually have some good language in the design review that I might steal from. But I remember we had this conversation, or maybe it's in the demolition section. I want to say it's maybe from demolition. To have them consistent. So just for understanding, demolition is when you do something intentional. The damaged and destroyed are things that aren't intentional. So if a tree falls on your house, you can put things back. If you have a non-conforming shed and you demolish it on your own, you don't have vested rights to put it back because you voluntarily removed it. So, or at least that's the way the rules are written right now. So this is talking about if you're damaged or destroyed. I do agree. I think 12 months is probably a little bit short. Let's see if that's should have a higher number to it or have more flexibility built into it. Because in some cases, the Miles, RK Miles, when it burned, it took a year plus just to get through the investigations and the insurance and all the other pieces. They couldn't rebuild even if they had wanted to. So they don't want to, but had they wanted to, they would have missed out on their 12-month window to rebuild as they were. And I don't think that's what we intend. I don't think that's what we want. But we do want to make sure things are, we don't have people coming in 20 years later to say, oh, I used to have a thing there and it burned down. So we need to have some deadline that's like, no, if you want to take advantage of that vested right, then you have to take advantage of it within a window. And we can decide as a community what that window of time is. So part two, which I don't have, but I'll just kind of go through. Part two is our zoning districts. And I know we've had a lot of discussion about maybe combining some zoning districts, maybe doing, so I think that will be our next topic to work on. So it breaks into two big sections. One is the zoning districts, of which I think we have 11 or 12 zoning districts. And then there's a second piece that is the design review overlay district. So we'll probably break part two into two different pieces because they're pretty dissimilar. And then we're going to have a lot of conversation on that first part. What does a zoning map look like? Where do we want to combine districts if we want to combine districts? I've argued we need to make one new district probably for the area where Cumberland Farms, Dunkin' Donuts, Domino's Pizza. Right now, that's in the same zoning district as Berry Street, and it's a significantly different area. So it either needs to be in a different district or it needs to be in its own district, and I would like to have that conversation. But I think we've got other areas we might be able to start moving and adjusting some lines, and some we may be able to, like we have a riverfront and we have a mixed use residential. Just how different are those? You know, should we just go and have one district that's mixed use residential? We don't need to have two. We have an urban center 1, 2, and 3. I think we should have an urban center 1, 2, and 3, but I think it's worth the conversation of why do we have 3 of them? Should we continue to have 3 of them? I know we should merge residential 1500 with residential 3000. There's no reason to have those two districts. We should definitely merge those two. And then I know there's been suggestions. I know Gabe has had suggestions. Why do we have Res 6 and Res 9 or Res 3 and Res 6? Can some of these get collapsed in on one? And that really depends on how we want to split those up. And I think that's the conversation to have. Currently, we went through, and we also have in part two, we have zoning districts, we also have neighborhoods. And the question is, should we continue to also have those neighborhood descriptions? That came up as a discussion point during the city plan adoption. So it's worth it if you've got the time to kind of flip through those. They're written into table format. Each zoning district has its own table. They have their own setbacks. They have their own densities. And it might be worth just taking a peek, but this is where I know there was a lot of discussion of, can we simplify the zoning districts? Do we need the neighborhoods? Meredith is going to say they actually are used quite a bit, even though people kind of see them as a little bit annoying. They do help a lot in the permit process. So it's worth having that conversation of, do we keep that there? And then again, as we work our way out, we'll talk about these districts, and whether we keep all of them or merge some of them. And then we'll save design review for its own meeting, and we'll bring in the folks from Historic Preservation Commission and the Design Review Committee to have them sit down and talk with you guys, because they're going to have the insight of the value of these. I do know, as I mentioned earlier, the process moves much more efficiently now. It's a much better process. We've had far less complaints about the design review process since we've updated the rules. But again, as we go through and explain them and you learn about them, we can then go back to that part 1 and discuss, okay, everything doesn't need a permit. And what are we trying to accomplish? And is, regulating where we put propane tanks that critical, and right now we look at a lot more in the design review. It's the highest density area. We have to have design review. We have to have some design review to have our downtown. And we currently have in the rules, if you're in the design review district, you're exempt from density requirements. So there's kind of a little bit of a a trade-off. You get a benefit for the added scrutiny. So, but we'll go through all those. And
Is there a map of all of these districts in the chapter?
yes, if you were to go onto the city website,
Separate, yeah, no.
It's a separate document.
Yeah.
It's not in the document.
yeah,
Okay.
Hey, Mike, could we, rather than get a Word document of the entire regs, just get the next section that we're going to discuss in a Word document so we can play around with it? So rather than 200 and some pages we'd get 30 some pages.
I will try to do that. This has been set up with, our consultant set it up in with certain amount of formatting, and as you break it out of the formatting, you break the formatting and all the numbering goes away. So it ends up being, but I might be able to, yeah, I don't know. It's tricky. It's not how I would have built it. It's the way it is built, but yeah, I'll see what I'll work. Nick is a bit of a good tech person to put that job on. See if he can come up with a way of breaking that apart without breaking it. All right, let me. All right, so you got the city website. Anyone is looking, you can go to the departments, go to planning. And then you got the zoning and subdivision regulations on the left. So, and then there's the zoning district map, the zoning district regulations, and then we have a natural resources inventory map and a slopes map. And the slopes map, we just voted to amend, so that is the new slopes map, and the zoning regulations we amended with the interim changes on July 9th. So these two you just saw, you guys helped approve. The natural resources inventory map hasn't been changed since 2021. We will be talking about that map. The state has come out with a new wetlands layer, and so we're probably going to have a discussion when we get to part 3 of asking whether or not we want to go and add the new wetlands data onto our map. And then we've got the zoning district map. So if you click on the zoning district map, this is what you end up with. And you can zoom in and zoom out. For the most part, we never use this map because we've got it all in GIS and we zoom in on people's properties. Which actually reminds me a little bit, actually I am here, so I can. So if you go to the city's website, and go to, see if I can find it. Because then I can point to, if you go, maybe it's on the assessor page. So if you go to the assessor page, there's a thing here on the left side as you go down, it says Montpelier VT Axis GIS map link. This thing's pretty slick. So this takes you to, it doesn't crash. This here, and if you look on the left side, you've got layers and we have the zoning map. So you actually could, now you've got this, you can, unlike the other map, you actually can zoom right in. This happens to be Sabin's pasture and those lines there. But you can get right down into very specific parcels. And this is through the assessors. So it has all the assessing data on it. So it's pretty cool. So property owner. But importantly, it gives you the zoning districts that you're in. So.
Sorry, can you show me one more time? I'm on the assessor's page.
It would
And I
be
wasn't
on the
looking at what you were doing.
left.
It
So
also
I'm-
has design review overlay as
Yep.
is
So to get there, so you got to this assessor page.
Yep, yeah. I'm
So
here
it's
now.
this one here. It's called Montpelier VT Access GIS.
Oh, perfect. Cool. Map link.
I bookmarked that because I love that's an easy place to kind of go and get it. They keep these up to date. And now this is in my way, so I can't get back. There we go. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't have there it is, zoning districts. So if you were to look over here, you could then match up the colors. In this case, that should be, those are, should be riverfront. Oh, that's up on College Hill. That's why it's Res 6. So Res 3, Res 6 is up through here. So yeah, it's a nice resource if you're looking for it. And I think Tim was just mentioning, or Sean was just mentioning, the fact that you also have the ability to look at the design review district, turn that on and off.
Those are the line.
Those are the slash lines. So if you have the slash lines, that means you're in the design review district. So it's, like I said, it's a nice, if you're looking to try to figure out, hey, what are the zoning districts? Can I get to just have some fun hunting around? This is a nice way of doing a little bit of homework. And like I said, maybe we could find some way of simplifying this and making it make sense and making it accomplish what we're trying to do. Oh, actually, looks like this one we'll have to go and talk to them about getting it fixed. They're missing our Res 3. There's a Res 3 up through here. So I'll have to. All right, I will get that fixed. So, that was kind of a little bit of a sidebar, but if folks are interested, these are the zoning districts. These are where they are, but you can find them online a little bit easier. There's our yellow 9-9 res, the 3,000 that's in there that wasn't on that other map.
So speaking of the next meeting, I have forgotten if, will we have a quorum on the 25th?
There we go.
I feel like we keep talking about that, but I don't remember what the outcome is.
Yeah, I think the question was, do we want to meet on the 25th?
I won't be in town.
I'll be here.
I'll be here.
Aaron.
We got 3.
You're here?
We don't,
Alright.
I'm not sure. So I think we might not have a quorum.
And then
Yeah.
I don't know about Ariane.
I
feel like
don't-
he said she couldn't.
I don't think she can. So we've got 4. So we could, if everybody shows up with the 4 remaining, or we could just go through and say, we're going to be talking about something consequential. I mean, we're going to start talking about
Yeah.
part 2. It would be great to have as much of the committee here as possible to start talking about the zoning districts. Maybe we
Okay, so this
give
is,
ourselves a little bit of a summer break and take an extra meeting off and meet up in September.
I think that makes sense. If,
yeah.
should we look out for the 2 weeks after that?
Yep, so that would be September 8th.
I'll be around for that one too.
Me too.
Yeah, so we are the 2nd and 4th Monday.
Oh.
So it looks like the first would be the first, which would be which would be Labor Day, but they are probably going to meet on the second, would be my guess, which means we would be on the 8th.
Okay.
So next meeting, September 8th. And I think the only other thing we have are the 2 sets of minutes for the 14th and 28th.
Okay. Do people want to take time to look at them?
Both sets of minutes seem fine and complete to me, so I would make a motion to approve the minutes from July 14th and July 28th.
Okay.
I'll
Does
second.
anyone want a second?
Was it Sean?
On seconds.
All right.
Okay. All those in favor?
I
I,
All right. So adjournment. Does anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
But Tim,
Any seconds?
second that motion.
All those in favor say aye.
I
Aye.
all right.
I. See you
Thank you
guys.
all.